Yeah, it seems to work pretty well for them, so. If we can do that, we'll try that and see. And you folks online? Stop.
They've got their name.
We may never see you if you want to speak.
Here we go.
I can't really see the screen.
Okay.
Danielle, hi Danielle. Who's that?
That's
That's
Daniel.
Dan.
Okay, let's get started. I just got us live on YouTube, so we're good there. I'll get us started with the introductory remarks. Good evening, everyone. My name is Willow Hamilton. I'm the City of Eugene staff representative for this meeting. Before the chairs convene the meeting, I have a few reminders and introductory words. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that tonight's meeting is being held on Kalapuya Ilihi, the traditional indigenous homelands of the Kalapuya people, whom continue to make contributions in their communities here and across Oregon and the land we now refer to as Oregon. We express our respect to all displaced indigenous people who call Eugene home. The purpose of the Active Transportation Committee is to advise the City of Eugene staff and community organizations and partners on the implementation of Eugene's pedestrian and bicycle strategic plan, represent community and constituent interests in transportation planning decisions, and provide feedback to staff on projects related to walking and bicycling. Eugene City staff will consider recommendations from the ATC along with input from other members of the public during decision-making processes. Please keep in mind that this meeting is being both recorded and live streamed to YouTube, meaning that it can be viewed on the City of Eugene Transportation Planning YouTube channel, both right now and in the future. The live transcription feature for closed captioning has been enabled. All commentary will be held in the public record. Today's meeting begins with a 15-minute public comment period. The public comment period is an opportunity for individuals to speak to the Active Transportation Committee on transportation-related issues. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. We will begin with those joining us online to see if there's folks online who would like to speak. You can use the raise hand feature within Zoom, and we'll call on you when it's your turn. When you speak, please give your name, city of residence, and if you're in Eugene, your neighborhood or ward if you know it. So let me go to the attendees list and see if anybody online right now has an interest in giving public testimony.
Is it possible to turn the lights down a little bit so I can see the screen?
They're either totally on or totally off. I am seeing Lucy on here. Lucy, is that here? I'm gonna allow you to talk. Are you the Lucy who's on ATC? Or is this a different public, like city member, Lucy?
You muted.
Oh. No, she's muted herself. Okay. I just wanted to elevate her to panelist. Oh, it is Lucy on ATC. Okay, promote to panelist. Okay, thanks, Lucy. You're a panelist now, so you can be able to kind of freely speak if you need to. Okay, well, since we don't have any online public testimony, folks, we'll move to those in person. It looks like Alan had written down yes for speaking.
I just wanted to report that we had a successful site tour last week at the intersection of Alder Street and Franklin Boulevard to look at the potential for an undercrossing. Mary was there and a handful of other people were there. I think folks learned a lot and it went pretty quickly. I'll probably do it again sometime. And I'm just going to keep this issue alive. I wanted to point out that there was an article in the paper just 2 days ago, states to get $570 million in grants for dangerous railroad crossings. That's used specifically for dangerous crossings and for big bridges and underpasses for roads and for paths. Look just a little bit into that, and maybe Rob, you know more about this program. It's a dedicated program, so it can't be, it can be used for protected bikeways or signals or anything like that. So this is a dedicated source for that. And so I just wanted to continue that conversation since at the last meeting, there seemed to be this idea that you had to choose between either, bike lanes or neighborhood greenways or, railroad undercrossing. But I think that's a false choice. I think we can have both. And finally, and this program lasts for a few more years. So, we may not get that funding, but at least it's out there. And finally, since I didn't have this before, I wanted to show you, this is the picture. I hope to get this relatives of this person. This is James Aaron David. He was the person who died at that railroad crossing. So when you go over that, you might think about railroad, Aaron James DeWitt, 49 years old. He was a devoted husband, father. He didn't enjoy gardening, building chicken coop, being with his 2 children. So his children don't have father anymore. He was active in the cycling community. He was a racer, and then when he stopped racing, he was a bicycle commuter. So this is not just someone who's just a vagrant. This is someone who was a bicyclist who died. So. Thank you.
Did we have any other testimonies for those of you in person? I didn't grab your name. Can you remind me your name again? No. Awesome. Thanks, Noah.
And what is the program? I didn't catch the beginning of it. The program.
Oh, the federal program?
It's a federal program.
Yeah, it's called the Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant Program.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Alan. I guess we will then, there's no one more.
Yeah, sorry, I was just getting the last few notes down. Let me just finish up on the introductory remarks to make sure we're good there. Yeah, I think we can close the public testimony period, and just a reminder that civil speech supports everyone in feeling comfortable sharing their perspectives and opinions, so remaining courteous and civil tonight. And with that, I'll hand it over to the chair.
So the first thing on the agenda is to approve the summary notes of the May 2023 meeting. I hope people had a chance to look those over. And we will entertain a motion to approve them or any suggestions for revising.
I'll make a motion.
Andrea,
Second.
second by Jared. Any discussion? All in favor? Thumbs up, whatever. Thank you. Okay, and that takes us to the path etiquette striping and signage. And I think-
Yeah. Annie, do you want to introduce yourself while I kind of pull up stuff and get some screen sharing going?
Yeah, hi, I'm Annie. I'm a first year Masters of Community and Regional Planning student at the University of Oregon. I am also an intern in the transportation department, mostly working on transportation options, but also working on this report and inventory of path etiquette, wayfinding, and striping. I'm really grateful as a student for every opportunity to practice talking to community members and committees whose opinion matters so much to the community. So I'm really grateful for y'all having me today. I'm gonna, if you'll go to the next slide. We're gonna talk about the signage and striping on the shared use plans. This is the project we've been working on for a second. Talk about an overview of the work being done so far and what we're hoping to do. The current condition and goals of the 3 tools. That's what I've been calling the path etiquette signs, wayfinding signs, and striping. And then questions and discussion for y'all in order to get feedback as really high intensity users of these kinds of paths, what you think about these tools and how we can improve them, set the stage for improving them. Next, yeah, thank you. Overview of the past work and plans. This is a continuation of the signage and etiquette campaigns and work. In the summer of 2022, a lot of new path etiquette signs were put out that have been a model for other communities, hoping to use the shared use paths in a standardized way. Ruth Bascom didn't really imagine people on hoverboards using these paths, but now that's our situation. So we have to figure out how to make it an etiquette, make it polite and safe, and everyone wants to use it. I'm currently working on documenting the current situation and needs, so gaps of where things are needed, where signs are needed, maybe striping. The Move Huge campaign has been a huge data source, and I'm really excited to dig into that. But also just engaging people who use these paths a lot and what you think is needed is going to be super helpful. This is setting the stage for future updates. I'm trying to get all the departments on the same page. There is some fear about clutter of signs. And so we're not making big moves of like, we're already going to send out like 50 new signs. That takes a long time, I'm learning. And so this is really trying to make sure we know what's out there and what's needed before anything else happens, and that communication is really solid so that parks can be on the same page, traffic control can be on the same page, everyone who's involved in these paths. So questions for y'all to consider, and then we'll talk about them at the end. I just really like knowing what questions are going to come so that as I'm seeing new information, I have a frame to look at them. Do you guys think that the tools, again, those three things, etiquette signs, wayfinding signs, and striping, match the goal that we're trying to reach on the paths, which I will show with each tool overview? What are examples of effective use of a tool that you can share? Can you share places where there is a need or a gap of a tool? And can you share places where there's a tool, but it's not helpful, it's clutter? Again, with maintenance and like these signs get graffiti on them, that, you know, they have to be mowed around. There is a need for them to be really efficient and not just a lot of signs up there. So paying attention to that too helps with what the plan is trying to accomplish. So starting with path etiquette signs, these are an example of the beautiful blue signs that went out last summer. The current conditions is that these 27 signs were put out last summer, but we don't know where they are, and even if all of them were put out. And so inventory is going to be a buzzword of this presentation. We're trying to create an up-to-date and accurate inventory. These we're trying to address concerns by the community about speeding and unsafe behavior, a lack of path safety signs, poor placement of signs. In that bottom picture, you can see that as you're going along the path, the sign is parallel to your motion, and so you can't even read the sign if you're continuing to bike along. And ambiguity of expectations. So the goals of these signs were to encourage safe behavior from all users, establish a standard etiquette, give people shared language for that, and indicate where increased attention from users is needed. Like as you're coming from Springfield under the bridge and you're about to hop onto that beautiful, narrow, windy path next to the river, you shouldn't be on an e-scooter going 15 to 20 miles an hour, things like that. Wayfinding signs. So there's three kinds. There's even more than three kinds. This is called the wayfinding sign. I call them direction signs, where there's more than one destination. They have more than one arrow, and they are at watershed places on paths so that you know if you want to go one direction, how far in either distance or time it may take you to get there. The middle is a connector sign. These are things on shared use paths where you know if you take this offshoot, you know what street you're on. And then the right is an action sign. It usually either has a bike route or a path name and then a single arrow. So it's saying if you go this way, take this action, you will be here. It doesn't have more than one option. Thank you. Current condition, there's approximately 397 wayfinding signs out in the field. That could be streets or shared use paths. The hope for those is that they create a coherent network, which is very difficult when there's so many, and some of them may have been taken down, some of them are like in disrepair. We don't know how many of those are on the shared use paths like alone, and so there's some old inventory from 2014. There's an example of where connector signs are on the Fern Ridge path. There's approximately 10 total on that whole path for all of the streets that intersect. So there's definitely gaps that exist. And then there's a pedestrian focused wayfinding project that was installed downtown with lots of options for how to get to places. And they were more like obelisks, like they were more, you know, place holding things instead of just like a green sign up in the corner. And so there are some new designs happening around how people get places. And the goals of those is to help people know where they currently are. So if you're on a path and you see a straight intersecting sign, you know, like if you're on the Fern Ridge path, what street you're intersecting, because that's often how people know their place in the city, and confirm their location that they're on a shared use path or they're on a bike route. And also find where they could go. So those action signs, destination names, the distance, and which way to go. And then finally, last tool is striping. These are pictures of the West Bank path north of Stiles Street. Thank you. Yes, the Active Transportation Committee. Stiles Street up towards Howard. It's one of the few places that has striping, consistent striping in town. And then There are some centerline adding at blind curves and underpasses, but they've been worn out. And then there's this Stoltz and Howard striping and repainting. This is also some striping. It's literally just that section that you can see, and the Valley River Center is to the northeast. So it's just for that blind curve going over that bridge towards the south. And the goals of striping is to incorporate safety and sharing into design. So you don't have to rely on looking at a sign. You kind of have that subconscious reaction of stay to the right. Regulate path sharing at high congestion points, indicate blind corners, and indicate dangerous passing areas in a much more intuitive way. And also in places like if you're telling a kid, remember to stay on the right side of the path, the kid is gonna be like, to the right of what? Like he's in the middle, is that to the right? Those kinds of things. Design where it's not even words tends to be really, really effective. And so striping, there was some pushback against striping, but now I think it's been really effective on that north side of the big. So if you go back to the initial picture, this is a group ride that I led on Sunday, and there was a bunch of women and femme folks riding, and they saw a skateboarder, they all naturally moved to the right, and there was no issues with taking that big path. So I think striping is really awesome. So discussion and questions I have for y'all based on this about goals. Do we think that tools match the goal? And are there effective examples of tools that you think should be highlighted throughout this as a model for continuing these tools? Now open it up to people to just respond.
Oh, the name has.
Oh, right.
Share.
Etiquette. New etiquette.
We'll start with Gary. Jerry?
I've been noticing a lot of the tools in the last year, and I've been really pleased and want to applaud the city's rollout of that. And I don't know that I've had quite enough time to like get my enough anecdotal data for myself, but I think the striping tool is brilliant.
Mhm.
I really think that and the signage that's been going along with it, which is the use your half kind of signage, if I remember correctly. Those are really sorely needed, and I think that they're going to be effective, though I can't quite say from my own experience that I'm seeing them be effective or how they are. I just think it's been so little time. The signage is really obvious, has obviously increased in the last year.
Mhm.
The wayfinding, I've just been noticing even around town, a lot of those wayfinding signs, but on the shared use paths, they're great and effective. The things that I have questions about, and I guess I would recommend more kind of study on are there's a lot of things that seem to be for like unimodal transportation. So like whether it's bike focused or pedestrian focused or even, scooter and e-bike focused, but the interaction of those groups is where I think we're going to see a lot of challenge in the future. So like, motorized vehicles that can go much greater speed, like, do they know kind of etiquette around passing cyclists or pedestrians, or pedestrian groups? And I think the striping will be really effective with this, but oftentimes you'd see people walking abreast a lot.
Mhm.
And I'm really hopeful that the striping is going to help with that. But and some of this is not so much on shared use paths, but on city streets as well. Where like today I was in a Sharrow lane, and I was taking the lane as a single bike, and a e-scooter came zipping to the left of me, passing, on a basically a one lane each way street, and I thought that seems, I don't know if that's quite right. So I guess it was kind of maybe a naivety or ignorance on my part as to whether that's safe or legal or the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But I think outreach on that kind of stuff too, safe passing, will be important. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to. I think a safe passing of groups, like bikes around pedestrians, e-bikes and e-scooters around non-e-bikes and pedestrians. Yeah, and the dogs on short leash, also brilliant.
Yeah.
Because that is seriously a safety issue, and I don't know that it was acknowledged, but the city code says 6 feet, and we still see those extendo leashes everywhere. So it's really nice to have that out there, because I can't tell you how many times one of those extendo leashes has come right out when I'm trying to guide, it's a safety.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Can you thank Charlotte and then Andrea and then Andrew and Mary?
I echo Jerry's thoughts about signage, and yeah, I get the clutter piece, but working in parks on wayfinding and so forth, what we found is that you can almost not have too many directional or orientation signs. It's like headings in a document. So what might feel like overkill is really good. So I'd say more, even though we got 400-ish, we probably could have some more. Really glad to see that there's behavior signs, there's wayfinding. Don't know what the thinking is with educational signs, which is the sort of the third prong of signage. So just float that question. And really pleased to hear you talk about striping, and we say maintained by design, not by sign. So if there's low prickly bushes that we can put, so that, there's a narrow, obvious one way this way and a narrow, obvious one way another, like a median, even within a bike lane. And I echo Jerry about passing it. Like, on your left, please. So, yeah, thanks for your good work.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I was just in New Zealand in March, and I got to look at some of their new infrastructure that they've done, which was awesome, some of it. And one thing they did quite a bit was actually put indicators on the ground, painting on the ground, which I found much more helpful than having to look up and look, because I know I'm looking ahead, hopefully, most of the time, unless I'm, doing something not helpful for me in biking. But yeah, paint on the ground. I don't know if that's like more of an issue with maintenance than a sign that could get graffitied and having to put it in a post hole and all that, but it was very helpful. And also because it's like they're also trying to deal with people that are coming from other countries that are on the other side from them. And then in terms of passing, one thing that I've seen there and other places too are those triangle signs that give the indication of who has the right of way, or which, and I think those are really nice, and like in a nice way to say it, it's a nice way to indicate it in a quick way, in a visual way. And then the other thing that I thought was really great was that every once in a while they have a path system sign. I hear you have the obelisk, which I don't think I've seen the obelisk downtown, but kind of an overall system sign I think is helpful. I mean, especially if there are things that are different, like it's something that's a completely bike path versus a bike way. And then also on there, they had numbers about how to report hazards, which I thought was also really helpful because people don't know that. And sometimes they do see something that's hazardous or really bad behavior, and it's helpful to get to report it.
So, as we make more rules, it relies on enforcement for people to understand that it's a standard, and often that's complaint based.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say two things. One, very pro striping. I know some people are not for striping, but I think it helps delineate the space, because like a lot of times when I'm on a bike, right, it's kind of like with cars, like a car going 30 doesn't feel that fast in a car, but if you're on a bike and someone passes you at 30 miles an hour closely, like it feels really fast. And so I have a lot of empathy for people walking when they say that a bike even going 12 miles an hour feels really fast.
That's
But
scary.
part of that issue too is like if you're in the middle of the path, right, you maybe don't hear. It's a lot of times people don't hear when you say on your left, right? I don't want to have to yell it at the top of my lungs. And so I think it can just help a lot of those interactions, like on both sides. Like people do need to slow down, but also, you shouldn't be walking in the middle of the path because you're not leaving enough space for people to safely pass. So I think striping helps with that. I think there are some other maybe concerns. The thing, I don't have an answer, but I think as we're getting an all ages and abilities bike network built out, I think we need to start thinking about how our wayfinding signage differentiates between different classes of bike facility. In Denmark, a lot of what they call their cycle superhighways, which were just kind of like their nice paths, because a lot of stuff is off street there, but they're kind of priority routes that are meant to be like the premier thing, always had like a bike symbol ++. And I don't know if that's the right thing, right? We should probably talk to like some slick marketing folks who can help keep it understandable. But like, once we have, the High Street and Lincoln and 13th, right? Those are different, and wayfinding signage is not for people who know the area and ride it every day, right? I don't look at wayfinding signage on my normal routes. I look at wayfinding signage when I don't know where to go. And so something that directs people who don't know where to go to the best option, I think is really important. Like, you don't want to just be like, oh yeah, like take 18th Avenue over there with your 5-year-old, like they want to get to 13th. So I think that's important, and I don't know what to do about that, but I'm sure you guys can figure something out.
That'd be really interesting. We did a temp who was a transportation planner from the Netherlands, who might have design ideas like that.
Oh, I am also in pro striping. I think it works really well. And I liked some of Andrea's ideas, and I like the idea of putting the wayfinding. I'm sure it's expensive and all that kind of stuff and hard to maintain on the ground, because that does take away that clutter. It's for the intended audience. And then, the car drivers don't have to necessarily see that. I think I really have a hard time on the Ruth Baskin River Bank path, knowing where to get off and on, because I just don't do it enough. And so I do not know where the different places lead to. And I think Springfield does a really good job of wayfinding on the Riverbank path. And I think that should be studied and copied, because they really have it down. And that's both on and off the trail. And then I just want to voice my opposition to the sign again that says no more than 20 miles an hour, because I think that's too fast. And I do not like that suggestion on the sign. I think it should say 15 miles if it's going to say anything. So I'm pretty wildly opposed to that particular sign.
Thank you.
One more quick.
Julie?
Oh.
Who knows? Ditto on the striping, ditto on, having signs painted on the road. And the one I have the biggest problem with, the safety sign that I have the biggest problem with, is go a safe speed, because, what is a safe speed? It certainly isn't 20, and I don't even know that it's 12 if there's children around. So it seems to me that it's a very deceptive message. And, I thought, well, what do you do instead? When you're driving and you're changing from a highway to somewhere where there's, a little community, it always says congestion, which sounds like a medical condition, but, but it's a word like that. And, I just think they should say slow. And then, you have those slow children signs, which is another one, which I think is very unfortunate. Slow children, but you could say slow kid zone. And because like when you're going along the bike path through Skinner Butte, through the play where there's a playground, boy, there's just little kids on their little bicycles and people with their dogs. And I think it needs to be much more, it needs to warn people, especially people who are on e-bikes, that there's a lot of different kinds of people. So please, let's get rid of the safe speed and the 20 miles an hour.
Thank you.
I'll just throw in my own comments before Jerry gets a second round. I think number one, things have gotten better. I'm impressed that I've seen a lot less risky behavior than it was, and I think the striping also, I think that helps. As far as the signs, the sign that says bike route, unless it's very clear where it goes, it's sort of seems like it doesn't. I don't find it too useful. One place I could use more signs is when I'm riding on River Road and trying to get to the river path. I'd love to know where the ones that are paved all the way to the river path are. I always end up on one that's mud, and I've got my Winco load of groceries and I'm sliding through the mud. It's like, ah, damn, guess wrong again, So that would be helpful to me to know where the ones, and even some of the signs that are there, it's like, okay, it says West Bank Path. It's like, does that mean turn here, or does it mean turn the next intersection? Where exactly is that access? And one other thing that I don't know how to do this, but it's sort of like, it would be nice if when you've given warning to somebody and they hear you, if they would acknowledge it somehow, because otherwise I'm sitting Oh, these got earbuds. I don't know if you heard me. Should I dig again? Should I yell it again?
Yeah.
I don't want to annoy you. I just would like to know that you heard me. So. Anyway, Jerry?
Just a real quick one that I forgot to mention, and I don't know how shared this experiences, but I still do see, and this is more specific to pedestrians, I believe. I still see quite a few folks traveling on the, well, what I would say, wrong side of the shared use path. So they're now raised in the kind of right side mentality. And I know this could be a cultural thing, but it's when you're riding and you have people, pedestrians coming in the opposite direction, it just seems kind of a setup for a dangerous situation. So I don't know if there's signage that can help with that, just kind of instilling or reinforcing the idea that the right side is the safe side of travel on a shared use path.
I have a theory about this, though, why people do this, because I think that some people get tired of people going around them and having to say,
On your left.
on your left. So they just would rather see you and just,
Yeah, I think it was Andrew or Julie who brought it up, and they both, the idea of the on your left comments. I'm a Bell user, and I've received some kind of irritation from people when I use my Bell.
Sometimes the bells sound really unfriendly. I like chose the friendliest sounding bell because I also have this fear.
I have a really happy bell too.
Yeah.
Because there's ones that go like ding, ding.
Yeah.
Yeah, those scare people, but mine goes like, "Boop." And it's like,
Yeah.
people say thank you to me a lot when I ding them,
Yeah.
so I see your bell.
Could be my bell. But I mean, is it just understood that a bell is the same as on your
Yeah.
left?
Really quick, I see there's a hand online, but Jerry, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there places that you know where often people are walking on the wrong side of the path?
I use the Amazon corridor a lot. That's the one I see, and it could be because it's a park and it's less, and I was gonna say that about striping as well. On the Ruth Baskin trails, striping, that's a clear like multi-use path, and it's not necessarily park. The Amazon Park's more difficult, and the bikeway that goes through there is, it's in a park, so, but I would personally love a stripe on that path.
On the Amazon corridor?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, South Eugene up to.
Lucy? Did you have something?
Yeah, I think I heard my name. Hi, everybody, it's Lucy. I'm online. I'm not in person today because I had a little head cold, so I stayed home. But just a couple of things that I wanted to add. One, the comment about folks coming too closely and speeding past you. I think something like a sign about passing on the left, because that is something that most cyclists will say, I'm on your left, and then someone who's walking will head over to the right. So just kind of putting that out there so that people can kind of already be thinking about hearing that phrase when somebody is passing by them could be really helpful. And then also for striping, one thing I've seen on a college campus before was in a like pedestrian and bike zone, there were actually stripes for the bike lanes and then a separate, section for pedestrians. So I don't know how much room there is on the paths that we have here in Eugene, or if that's even an option, but to create even more lines just to create that additional flow of traffic.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
So,
thanks.
we're pretty much at time on this. Rob, did you have something to say?
Well, we could make stencils and like literally just spray paint the side streets on paths. I think that's something that's pretty actionable for us to do.
Yeah.
Something I could see Annie just like jump in on. Like that. So I was just thinking like that's, getting signs installed is a much bigger deal. Another thought too, in response to what Lucy just said, is there has been talk about putting like bark mulch paths parallel to some of our shared use paths. And I think that would help give people who are walking in and don't interact with bikes just like another option. I mean, if they're comfortable walking the bark mulch, they could go off to the side. And I think it would just help with some of the where we do have the congestion. In an ideal world, I'd love to have like a whole nother walking path like we have in DC, but I think because of topography and just costs, I don't think it's gonna happen here for the most part. I mean, we have that in the Riverfront Park, but But I think park mulch could be like maybe happy medium. They actually have that in Springfield on their riverfront path.
It's better for your legs too.
Yeah, we had someone who used to come testify, who has, I think, a disability where it was really hard for him to walk on, harder surfaces. If he didn't like how we were replacing asphalt paths with concrete, because it's a little harder, so.
That's good feedback.
Thank you all so much.
Okay, well, thank you for coming, yeah.
Thanks, Annie. You're welcome to stick around. You can also head out. So I know it's finals week. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna go finish my homework. Thank you all so much.
That's, yeah. Okay, and that leads us to the High Street Signal Plan.
Okay.
Rob and I are gonna talk about this, so let me get up. Yeah, Rob, if you want to sort of jump in and then
Sure.
I'll pull up the.
I'm gonna start with an apology because I thought that High Street was gonna work just like 13th, and I was wrong. And so I may have communicated that to you, and I'm sorry that I did that. Because,
Part of it we wanted to work just like-
well, yeah, I think what you're gonna learn is it's not gonna be, it may not be as good as 13th, and so that's the bummer. But I wanna explain to you like what the challenges are, because it's about. And what we're hoping like some options are, and we actually want to get your input on some of the options. So the biggest issue is that 13th Avenue had a lot more money in the project and enabled us to replace a lot of traffic signals. And each traffic signal could cost up to $500,000 to build and put a new one in. It's super expensive. It's kind of hard to believe.
It is
And
hard to believe.
yeah, and
Like a loaf of bread, it's hard to believe, but.
$10 for highway, yeah. So that's one of the issues is that we don't have the budget to replace all the traffic signals on High Street. And one of the issues too is that a lot of the traffic signals at High Street crosses are fixed time signals. And so they don't have any detection for either bikes or cars or pedestrians. And so what they do is they'll run like 18th and High, it'll bring up the pedestrian phase every time, regardless of whether there's a pedestrian there. So what that means is like, unlike 13th, where we can get, if there's no one on 18th and you come along, or whatever the cross street is, you come along on 13th, you'll get the green pretty quickly, right? It may not like give you like a platoon thing, but it'll give you, it's very responsive. And the challenge is when you have a fixed time signal and you're always bringing up the pedestrian phase, you don't have the ability to flip it over to the street that's intersecting with it. So so I thought I could just sort of walk you through the corridor and tell you about some of the things we're talking about internally and what some of the possibilities are. We are going to have bicycle detection throughout the whole corridor. So what that means is like for the traffic on High, so we're going to, for the most part, we're either going to have a green for bikes or a green for motor vehicles, just like on 13th. And the main reason for that is that our goal is to make it as safe a corridor as possible. And as sometimes that sacrifices a little bit the convenience. So what it means is like if you have a green as a bike rider, you'll always be able to turn onto the street that you're intersecting with. So if on High Street, approaching 18th, one option, so there'll always, anytime High Street gets a green, there'll be a walk signal. And so something we're talking about is the walk signal can either run with the bike phase or can run with the car phase. And a walk signal is, generally speaking, the minimum length of time for a walk signal is more or less, you have 7 seconds of walk where it's the white. And then you have the flashing don't walk is based on the width. And it's something like 3-4 feet per second or 3.5 feet per second. We measure the width of the street and then we determine how many seconds of flashing don't walk to have. And that's called the pedestrian clearance interval. So one idea we have is on 18th and High in particular, where there's not a lot of auto traffic on High Street at that point, when the walk signal comes up, always have it run concurrent with the bike phase. And then the cars will just get a very short amount of green time right there. So we'd be preferencing the bike phase over the car phase for High Street. And it would run as long as the pedestrian clearance interval. We are looking at the possibility that the that the walk phase can run concurrent with the bike phase and the auto phase. We do that at 18th and Alder. So if anyone's ever been down Alder at 18th, you might see the walk signal on, and then it'll the bikes might have a green and then it'll go to red for bikes and green for cars on Alder and the pedestrian phase is still going. One thing, one of our traffic and signal operations supervisors, Brett, says that. So like on 13th, he thinks that. Basically, he thinks that on whether it's 13th or high, he thinks he can do. There's two options in general that he can look at doing at these signals. One would be to run well, there's three. There's what I just told you before, where we just run the head phase and bike phase together. And then the car phase really short. That'll be harder to do the further north we get, where the auto traffic starts to get higher, like, it'll be more challenging. So that's one option. Another option is what we do at Alder and 18th, where we kind of overlap the bike phase and the car phase. So that the bikes could get more time. Because what happens sometimes is like, if the bike phase is on its own, and then you have the cars with the peds, there's less time, the bike phase might be short. Because the pedestrian crossing is really the longer thing. And then the other, sorry, I'm kind of going all over the place here. The other thing is that there'll always be, the cross street will always have a certain amount of green time. So it's kind of like for the green time north-south, where this is sort of about how do we divvy that time up to some extent, okay? The other option is we could do what we do on 13th, where when it's 13th's turn, not the cross street, the bike phase could come before the car phase, but if a bike comes along when the cars are going, there's also the bikes get another bite at the apple. We had a green. I don't know if everyone's ever noticed that there. Like you have. So like if you're biking, say to High Street, and you might see someone a bike rider at High going, say, towards campus, they got their green and then it went to red and you kind of get there and then the cars are going left and straight on 13th, but then you'll get a green before High Street. So that's another option we have, is to have the bikes have the opportunity to get a green before the auto phase and after. But we don't think that we can do that and run the pedestrian and bike phase, and car phase all together. So there's some trade-offs we have, is what I'm saying. We could run, and it doesn't have to be the same everywhere, because I mean, basically, the bikes will get to go when they have their green, the bike riders. So my feeling is is to make it situational. Like I feel like at 18, let's give the bikes a nice long green every time. But at some of the other signals, it might be based on detection and maybe give the bikes the opportunity to have a green before or after the motor vehicle phase. But those are just some of the things we're thinking about. And I'm definitely open to your ideas. Another thing we tossed around was having like at 6th and it's 7th and High. We could have the southbound bikes always have a green when the cars on High have a green, and just tell them you're not allowed to turn onto 7th. Because who's going to bike south on High and make a left on 7th to go to the Ferry Street Bridge, right? Nobody. So but we did something like that at Patterson and 13th, where now we say to bikes, you're not allowed to turn on Patterson. But now the cars and bikes get their green at the same time on 13th at Patterson. And so that makes the system work better. So we're really looking at like, what can we do at every signal to make it work most efficiently? I know there was maybe some talk about, well, could you not let motor vehicles turn left at 10? Was something, I don't know if you guys ever talked about here. I know some folks have mentioned it. One of the issues there is that in the corridor, we're trying to make it so like anytime a bike gets a green, that they can turn and not have to worry about a conflicting car phase. Now there is in some cities, and we may have this somewhere in Eugene, you could have like you can make the bikes do a 2-stage turn and have like somewhere where it's clear that they have to go wait to make that, but it can be kind of hard to help bicycle riders understand how to do that maneuver. I mean, there's certain places where we could just say, well, we're not going to let bikes turn here, like we don't at Patterson, or we're like we wouldn't at 7th, because there's just not any reason why a bike rider would use those streets. Well, I mean, they could, right? Somebody might live down Patterson, but they're not streets with bike facilities on them. And they're also really busy streets. They're not like a neighborhood greenway or even a local street. I'll stop in a second. But 10th, there are things down 10th. You could see somebody biking south on High and making a left on 10th to go to the Baker Center, or there's a apartment building right there. There's an office building. There's some different destinations. Well, no, I'm saying going down High and making a left on 10th.
Oh, left. Okay.
Right, because that's the.
Okay.
So anyway, that's, there's just a bunch. So we're kind of talking with our traffic operations folks about how do we operate the signals. Now, we could look at trying to get money to rebuild some of these signals over time and replace, so that we have more options like we do on the 13th corridor. But that's more of a longer term proposition. So I will stop there. And Willow, did I miss anything that we
I
wanted
think
to talk
the
about?
one thing I wanted to add, and we can clarify some of the options too, if you want to sort of talk through them, but the one thing I wanted to add was I just wanted to appreciate the ATC for bringing this up.
Right.
Because our team hadn't, I think we understood it to be a little bit different than what the traffic engineers, the signal engineers had planned.
Right.
And so this conversation that you all kind of started with us, I think some of the options that Rob is throwing out, we wouldn't have maybe even talked about if you hadn't brought this up. So I'm just like really grateful that you all did, because now we're having this conversation with the signal engineers, and hopefully we can, work within our constraints, timed signals, not ideal, to create a situation that's at least better for cyclists than if the signal just came around once every cycle, which is what we're trying to figure out how to avoid.
Actually, if I could just say a couple more quick things. So the way it's designed right now, and we could make some tweaks to this, is that there's no detection except for a 13th. Maybe there's like one other exception to that. And so the signals run on fixed time. We will be adding detection just for the bikes on High Street. So if there were no bikes on High Street for like an hour, the cars on High would just get their green. But if a bike came along, that's where the bikes will cut into the car time.
Mhm.
That's how it's designed right now. So like I said, there's the possibility like at 18th that we could just always bring up the bike phase. Those are the kinds of things that we have some flexibility on.
Yeah. And once it's built and it's running and we're trying it out, signals are one of those things that you can adjust.
Right.
So it's not like it's built and we can't change it. We can be sort of adjusting it.
The timing, yeah.
So I guess I just want to make sure I understand something, and then I have a couple questions, comments. So you're saying that there will be bike detection on High, but northbound car traffic at many intersections, there's no road sensor to pick up whether or not there's a car, and so it's effectively time. There's a window of time, and then the bike signal, as it's currently designed, would allow bikes to cut into that time. So there's service.
So, yeah, and one of the things that I find a little frustrating is that if there were no cars, we would still bring up the car phase because the bike signal is just eating into that. And so one thing I'd like for us to look into is, well, could we add detection just for the cars on High? So at least we know what's going on with them,
I guess that's kind of, one of my points. The other thing I was thinking about was, I guess it's like kind of two different things to maybe explore, because I don't know that there's a good answer, but can we just time the bike signals, right? If you do that, is there some way that we can, right? We got some really talented people in traffic ops. And so could we somehow figure out a timing that doesn't destroy the cross traffic, but that effectively would make like a green wave of sorts for bikes? I get that that's probably not possible, but if you don't put detection and you just time them, it's more possible than if we have to be there to interrupt it, right? Because if you have to be there to interrupt it, then you're gonna get stopped at pretty much every cycle. And if it's not as good as 13th, where you pretty much always get a light within 10 seconds, I don't think it's gonna be the best experience. The other thing to solve that would be, I've seen in other communities not having bike signals, which means that bikes can, they put up signs that are like bike use the pedestrian signal, which I think there's some trade-offs, but a lot of the streets might not have viable turns. And I get that this gets really confusing if some streets have bike signals, but if a lot of them have protected left turns and we can restrict left turns, or if there aren't viable turns for bikes going eastbound, then, I guess you guys put the straight arrows on 13th where that's possible.
in Patterson.
Yeah.
Right. We're
it
talking about
seems
doing
like-
that for southbound bikes. It's 7.
Yeah, I don't know. I would need to look at a map. It seems like there's maybe opportunity. And then I guess, yes, do we want the walking signal with bikes? Absolutely, because that'll give a lot more time to bikes. And also conceptually, right, it doesn't make sense to put people walking with cars, because if people on bikes are turning and hit someone walking, that's much lower consequence than if someone driving hits a person who's crossing the street. And so just conceptually, I think you should do that on 13th and anywhere that we have bike signals, because it doesn't make sense to make the most vulnerable users deal with cars, right? They should deal with bikes. And then that also functions as giving people walking and biking a little bit more priority, I think.
Can we do a quick show of hands if people agree with that? 'Cause I think that's I think that's a really,
It's an obvious point.
yeah.
So would you time High Street for southbound bikes or northbound bikes? Because it's hard to do it in both directions. at the
I'd
same
probably
time.
time it for north because you can still go on Pearl. And so
Mm.
if there's a bike lane on Pearl, it's not viable for a lot of people to use. But if you, there's no other alternative heading. north.
And those like fast bikers, the people who just want to go.
Right,
They
the-
could go
the-
to
the
Pearl.
fastest people are gonna be the most comfortable going on Pearl.
So if you time it like 12 miles an hour or something, and then cars can use that too, and you just have to drive slowly if they don't hit the greens or something.
That'd be
like that.
great.
I don't know if we can do that. I'm just saying that.
If you can get the cars to go 12 with the lights, I would
It's
absolutely.
appropriate.
love that. And you know what? People driving would love that because they don't have to stop and they hate stopping too. So the last thing really quickly, I do think long-term, if this is the kind of complexity that we have to deal with on every two-way bike facility, I think we need to have like a bigger conversation about what the right level of protection is and where, if that makes sense, right? Like, I do think that we should have a really high level of protection, but you know, do we need every person to feel comfortable at every intersection? Maybe on some routes, maybe not on every route. How do we differentiate that stuff? I don't know. I just don't think that we can have every major bike road. I get that there's sometimes a trade-off between safety and kind of the convenience, but I just don't think that our system is going to be super functional if every single one of them has this big trade-off where you get stopped at a lot of lights. Like personally, I would rather take alternate routes that are going to be less safe because I would like a little bit more speed, even though the optimum balance for someone like me is still more safety than I'm getting today and less speed, but not quite as low as maybe we need for a network made for kids going to school. I'll rest
Yeah,
there,
we're
sorry.
over time, so I want to continue the discussion, but please be as concise as you can. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sure.
so, thank you, Rob. So a lot of emphasis on bikes, and I guess my point would be, I would like to see as much time as, however, the principle I would like you to adhere to is as much time for bikes and pedestrians, however that plays in when I think of fuel penalties is 880. Because the pedestrian ones are usually too short if you're elderly, or you're in a mobility device or something, and I'd say safety over convenience, but I get what he's got, so there's a bit of tension there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Julie?
Well, these are incredibly complex issues, and it seems like we're always trying to fit, you know, a square peg into a round hole when we add bicycles, when we're trying to build a bicycle system into a car-based system. And I would just like to reiterate, since you listened so beautifully to our requests to make it easier for cyclists, that you make it really easy for cyclists and you consider having a street that is closed to cars and that is bikes only in each way. And I would love to see a vote here, quick show of hands, to start thinking a little more radically about what a bike-friendly city looks like.
I wish I had 3 thumbs.
And pedestrians.
Yeah, bike, well, I'm assuming that, you know, if you're having safer bikes, more safer pedestrians, so just,
Yeah.
you know, just saying, and I know it's a dream.
I didn't see who was first, Andrea, or Mary.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, I don't know if any of the intersections at all, maybe south are candidates for taking out the light and just making a four-way stop. So I think that should be at least looked at. Save a little money, eh?
Yes,
We're doing that
On
on Willamette Street. At
What a
8th,
good idea.
Willamette, Olive and Lincoln.
We're pulling the signals out, and putting four-way stops in.
Oh, good.
Appreciate it.
Wow.
Comment, the suggestion, yeah.
Yeah,
I just to understand too, are there leading pedestrian intervals on any of these, or are they just, like, how do they work exactly? Like, I'm, like, when you say the bike signal and the pedestrian signal go together, what does that mean exactly, I guess? Because sometimes, you know, the car signal is at the same time too.
I don't know. I don't think we have any leading pedestrian. So this is where you give the walk signal a few seconds before
right.
the green. I don't think we have that on this corridor, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
I think we tend to do it on a case by case basis around Eugene. I mean, it's not, I think we're open to doing more of them.
Okay.
I think if it were with a bike phase, we wouldn't need to worry about that as much, you know, but it's a good suggestion.
Right, but I was just wondering, because I know that when the engineer was here before, I mean, it seemed like stuff that was like closer to downtown, it was just on a clock. He was saying that it's like not possible to even change, you know, the way it's working. So.
And just so I didn't really talk about what's up on the screen here, but the blue is the cross street. And, you know, and I don't know that that's totally set in stone. But it's generally, you know, you can, the bigger the blue pie there, the kind of heavier traffic volume the cross street is compared to High. You know, there might be some negotiations where we can get a little more green time for High at some of those intersections, but I'm just not sure. Like one idea I was tossing around was, and I don't know how sophisticated the traffic signals are, because these are, a lot of them are pretty old, but like on 18th, I could see like, you know, 5 p.m. There's a lot of demand on 18th, but a lot of the day that's a lot lower, and maybe you can get more green time to High during other parts of the day. Because bike riders, I think, and I'm generalizing here, but they're biking throughout the day more than your typical like commuter. So anyway, just a thought.
I'll just throw in my own quick 2 comments. In the first place, whenever we can get a one-way bikeway instead of two-way, it's
Yes.
life a lot easier.
So we have one more 2-way coming on Lincoln, and then I think we're done after that. So at least in terms of what we have in our plans.
And then the other thing is, I would really discourage you from taking the idea that, oh, it's signals, we can just change them after it's up and running.
Mhm.
Because, you know, we took a lot of hits from 13 because people got so frustrated
Right.
right away.
Okay.
And as it turned out, down the road, it got a lot better.
Right.
But that initial was, I ruined it. No,
Right.
it's hard to recover from that.
Good point.
People are already dreading High Street. High Street, but then the experienced cyclists I've talked to, they're already dreading that you're gonna ruin High Street. So. Okay, thank you, Rob, for coming.
No,
Sure.
And, we have, we still have Make-Way Day. Before our break.
We could take something off the agenda that's not timely, because we did take longer for that one.
How long is that?
Like
It's
Make-Way Day is
just in
September, this is. what are we in? June.
I mean, the bike wheel location, we could totally move to a different. agenda.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's do that.
okay,
Or you could, that might even be able to be done electronically.
yeah. So let's move our break to 6:35 to 6:40. Okay, so that gives us a handful of minutes to talk about Make-Way Day.
Okay, so Make-Way Day. If you remember, let's see it. Well, we're supposed to be presenting this. You might remember at the last meeting, we got comments from Joan, I don't remember what Joan's last name was. About something she had experienced in another country that they had a specific day designated, it was in September. That's, I guess, globally, that is trying to get people out, improving their own walkways. So it's you know, like in neighborhood groups, school groups, or whatever. To, you know, trim back vegetation, patch places that need it, just get our sidewalks in better condition. And I think we can all agree that our sidewalks are in horrible condition. So I guess the question is, do we want to follow up on her idea in some way? And if so, what would that be? Mary, you can add on anything. I don't know.
Well, I don't remember Willow at our planning agenda thing. She said that the city's not in a position to take that on. So, you know, it's like if we wanted to forward it in some way, they could, you know, send out communication in motion and that kind of thing, but they won't take the lead on it. Is that correct, Willow? Yeah.
Partially just because of just capacity.
Yeah, it's just
More
not
than
built
anything,
into our
yeah.
work plans. It's not like we don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
It would just take time for us to get something like that sort of built into the
Right.
workflow of our team.
And her name's Joan Medina, and it started in Ireland.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the timing is difficult because, you know, everybody's gone on vacation, then all of a sudden it's September and boom, everything is starting again. It's hard to plan ahead of time because you can't make any plans with people who are on vacations, you know. So it's hard to pull it off in September, but that's when they, I think that's a great idea. Here. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great idea too. I think it's really needed for sure, but I guess the question would be, is September, do we have to do it in September when everybody else does it, or it could be another time, or maybe it could be, you know, next year, or, you know, we can look ahead further. I guess when stuff is all growing on the sidewalk, that's when you want, the end of summer, I guess.
May.
That's probably why they did it then. Yeah, I would say I really like this idea, and I think we all, as a group, generally, nobody's gonna be against the idea of cleaning up the sidewalks, but I do think the city's involvement and backing and kind of person power and marketing power will be really, really helpful to make it actually work and be sustainable. I mean, I think the vision would not just be to do it once, but to make it a thing, an annual thing, and to make it part of the culture. And I think we all kind of agree that we need a culture change around sidewalks in the city. That's also going to take some other things, but I think, and that might lead into a discussion later this evening, but I mean, I think the city at some point, if they really have this vision of a walkable city and these climate friendly communities and all this, sidewalks they're going to have to come to terms with this. And I think that that's not going to be this year. It's probably not going to be next year, but it's going to have to happen if they're really going to try and make that work. So I would suggest that this is an idea that we keep maybe returning to or keep on the back burner until the city is in a position to be able to incorporate it into their planning, really, I guess. That would be my suggestion for it. Because I'm really for it. I just don't think we as a group are going to be able to get it off the ground in a meaningful way.
Where?
Well, I think the city, again, does need to do something with the sidewalks, and we've talked about different things like funding. And I think that there needs to be some plan, and that there's been some mention of maybe hiring somebody else on the city staff who would put more attention on sidewalks. And so I would like the city, I guess, we could make a recommendation that the city come up with a plan for sidewalks, and maybe we supply our suggested menu of ideas, and funding it and make way day. Because if there isn't funding, and if there isn't this and there isn't that, then there better be a make way day. You know what I mean? It's got to be something. And so that, I guess my comment would be, let's make a plan, and advise the city to make a plan for sidewalks.
Was that a motion?
It could be, I don't know, right now it's discussion, and if we have time, we could also bring it up next time, depending on time.
Could we start like small, like do one small neighborhood like this year, if we're worried about not being ready?
Like the pilot program.
Yeah, like start
Yeah.
small, see what it's like, what goes into it, and get bigger each year.
I think, as I understand it, Joan has been going around to some of the neighborhood groups and is hoping to get them on board, which would, if they would take it on, that would be great.
I will briefly mention, so I'm on the South Eugene Neighbors Board, and Joan did present at our meeting. We already have an annual sidewalk cleanup sign up. We advertise it on our board newsletter, our neighborhood association newsletter, Facebook page, Nextdoor, and basically we board members and volunteers of the neighborhood association will come to your house and clean up your sidewalk vegetation for free, haul away, whatever. Simply fill out this quick Google form, and we will be there on this and such date. That was scheduled for June 10th, and it was advertised for 2.5 months. 0 signups.
Wow.
0 signups, and believe me, in that same time period, I've submitted 15 code complaints to the city around sidewalks. So it's not that there's not a need, it's just that. So I guess it's a complex issue, but it's a cultural thing, it's an educational thing. You have to get people, and I think that's what Make Way Day is about. It's about raising awareness of, like, sidewalks are tenants and property owners' responsibility, and we are all in this together, and here's a day where we're all going to get out and take care of our sidewalks. So it's really an outreach, publicity, marketing kind of thing. And so I don't know about the making it, around one neighborhood association, because I don't know how you do that other than maybe knocking on doors individually. Maybe that would work. I don't know. Maybe you do knock on people's doors and ask, can we help you up your sidewalk? But
It looks like Josh is online.
Josh, hang
Can't
on,
hear.
we're not hearing you. I think this happened last time where
Yeah, I
partway
think
through the
that-
meeting, it kind of gave out.
Oh, no.
Oh, that was you. Cool.
I guess I'll just say I push back a little bit on this make way day. I mean, I get the intentions of it, but I think ultimately it's the city's responsibility to deal with the sidewalks. Like nobody would expect a neighbor to go and repave a road where cars go. Why are we expecting neighbors to go out and fix public right of way? I really think this is a responsibility that the city should take up. That's my comment.
If I could just share a few thoughts, I think this is more about like vegetation and debris and not like sidewalk tripping hazards and things like that. I totally agree with Mary that we should have a sidewalk strategy. We have a new staff person who's supposed to be starting on July 11th. And so one of the things I like to put on her plate is working with us to develop a sidewalk strategy. One of the things I noticed recently is the Civic Park grass was growing real tall. And so I just called them and they were like very apologetic and got up there. They haven't been up there because they're a construction project, but they got it up there and they trimmed the grass. And so, because it was starting to fall into the bike lane and the sidewalk. And so I think there's an awareness thing too, that the people who are least likely to be on your Facebook and next door are also less likely to know what their responsibilities are, I would guess,
Yeah.
just generalizing. So I think there's a lot we can do. I think a sidewalk strategy would be a great thing for you guys to help us with, because it could be like a multi-pronged thing. Like there's the whole debris vegetation, there's like site maintenance, infill. And there's probably a couple other things too that are like snow shoveling. If we have like this overall strategy and then a multi-pronged approach, because there's a funding component to this, make way day funding that would be an easy thing. We can do that in our operations budget, but like, how do we pay for sidewalk maintenance? Like one idea floated around is just having like a $75 or $100 fee that everyone in Eugene pays every year. And then the city will take care of all the sidewalks, and not all at once, but we'd be able to actually like mobilize, hire more people and like fix more sidewalks. Whereas right now, we don't even have one crew solely dedicated to sidewalk repair in the city. So it's a big problem. And we know that. So thank you for your attention to this.
Yeah, I feel like that's what happened with the street repair bond, where our streets were just in absolute disrepair. And eventually the city was like, this is terrible. We need to charge to make this happen. And the bond came about, and now we've been running it for almost, we just got our next 5 years for 15 years or something. It's been really effective. So it's like, maybe if we get something like that going for sidewalks.
And one of the things that makes sidewalk repair so complicated is street trees, is that there's almost always street trees involved, and those are the city's responsibility, not the property owners. And so you have to have like an arborist or urban forester working with the contractor. And so it's hard for just the resident to hire their own contractor when there's tree root issues.
Personally, I guess I'd like to see it sort of a short-term answer. Okay, maybe you can't do the definitive forever improvement of the sidewalk, but if you can just make it so that people aren't gonna break their legs on it.
Right.
Just, even if it's only gonna last for a couple of years or something, it seems like getting it better might be better.
Thanks for your clarification, Rob.
Sure.
Okay, Charlotte?
So I'd like to formalize Mary's suggestion as a motion, say we'd like to suggest to the city to develop a sidewalk strategy.
Okay, fair enough. I'll second that. Yeah.
Completely funded.
Yeah, complete with funding.
Options always good.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And any more discussion? Because we're out of time. Okay, all in favor? Let's see what people online are doing, but
Looks like we've got many people in favor.
okay. Okay, I think that takes us to our break.
Yeah, we got 5 minutes, come back at 6:45.
Good job.
Folks online don't hear me. On the north side of 22nd, between Fillmore and Chambers, And then we widened the sidewalk on the west side of Chambers from 22nd South to 22nd North. And built a little bump out ramp up to 22nd North so people can hop back into the street.
And just, there's a big school, right? Can you?
Arts and technology,
Yeah.
middle school. Now, we couldn't widen very much on the west side of Chambers because there just wasn't much room to widen without having to acquire right away from people's property. Whereas here, I think what we somehow we were able to do it. On the 22nd, there was more room to widen within the right of way. I don't remember if it was parking or narrowing travel lanes or what. So the plan was, as part of the paving project we're doing this year, we were gonna remove parking on the east side of Chambers between 22nd South and 22nd North, shift the travel lanes over and build a two-way protected bike lane using like bollards and sort of tactical urbanism tools between on the west side of Chambers between 22nd North and 22nd South. And what happened was our traffic engineer folks they determined that the shifting the, is this looking in the, this is looking further, we actually want to be looking from the opposite side, right?
Oh,
This is northbound.
We're looking north down here.
I guess it's like the same
It's
idea.
okay,
with
it's the
this
same idea,
arm.
yeah, so basically, by shifting over the travel lane, the signal heads wouldn't line up with the auto travel lane anymore. And so they said what we needed to do, if we were gonna follow our guidelines, what we needed to do was shift the mast arms. We put the longer mast arm here, that's for northbound, on the southbound direction, because the travel lane, the southbound travel lane is being shifted further east. And so we would need this longer mast arm, so the signal will come out more. And so what we did is we actually looked at, these are really old signals, and we looked at, could we do that? And our engineers determined that the foundations for their signals, these signals are so old, that they're worried that if we put a longer mouse arm on this one, that the whole thing could flop over. So, and remember, we talked earlier about how much new traffic signals cost. I mean, in theory, we could just put a new pole, we could just replace this pole, that might be like 100,000 rather than 5. But still, it would be a chunk of change, right? And so so basically, that's where we were like, oh, we can't do it without doing the bigger thing. And then I remembered that they said guidelines. And so we took a step back and we looked at, is it still possible to do it? Even if it, their guidelines doesn't mean rules, it's a little different. So we just did the analysis. We haven't heard back 100% yet, but I think that it's doable, but it probably won't be able to happen as part of the paving project this year. But it could potentially be something that we do in the next year or two. One of the issues is that if you go back to the overhead, is that we decided that to make it work, so remember, there'll be a northbound travel lane, bike lane here, so it'll be contraflow to the cars. And they'll be coming up north on Chambers, going to 22nd North, and then those people would be forced to turn left on the 22nd North. And we don't want them crossing the westbound lane here for the people who are coming out, because they're not going to be looking for bike riders coming from the opposite direction. So we want to build a little ramp on this bump out and direct the bike riders up into that. And then they can navigate their way back onto this, pretty low volume street. But to do that, we need to build a little ramp, and it's concrete, and it wasn't designed into our paving project, unfortunately. So it's probably too late to do it as part of this year's paving project. I'd say there's like a 2 to 5% chance we could do it as part of this year's paving project. That said, I think we could probably do it in the next few years. One of the things I want to talk to my team about is maybe just doing the permanent project and not doing the quick build where we use bollards. I'm concerned from talking with Jeff that there's just a lot of aggressive driving behavior on Chambers. And I'm concerned about putting like a quick build type project there. Because basically what we'd be forcing, I'm not tall enough, but we'd forcing drivers coming south to then have to bend out. And that could have a traffic calming effect, but imagine if there's a drunk driver, someone just keeps going straight and misses that little curve. So I'd rather have a permanent curb there that's maybe a little more imposing than a tactical urbanism type thing. So that's sort of what I want to talk to my team about. I think this is another thing we could look at, take a little longer, but this might be a competitive project for a state Safe Routes to School grant. And those projects are, I'm actually on a committee that reviews them, and so I have a lot of experience with them, and they're very numeric and quantitative. And I think this project could potentially score really well because this is probably a Title I school. This is like a high-speed corridor. Those are some of the factors that they look at. So that's another thing is anytime we can get grant money, I mean, it would take longer, but it would be it means we're leveraging. And we've done so many of these kinds of projects around Eugene that we don't have a lot of good candidates for the statewide Safe Routes to School grant program. So this is one that might work really well. So I want to talk about that, maybe do a permanent, but, and then we're waiting, we got the initial analysis, but we're running it by the traffic. Reed just emailed our traffic engineers today to say, okay, here's our understanding is that our analysis is this will still meet the rules of like bidding without having to move the signal thing. But could we, you know, do you guys agree with that assessment? So we haven't heard back from them because he just emailed them like a couple hours ago. I mean, another thing too is if we apply for the grant, we maybe could just do the signal thing too at the same time, a similar possibility. So we're looking at it, we're trying to take the concern seriously. I mean, I think another issue from talking with Jeff is just like, maybe this is a citywide issue and a nationwide issue, not just Chambers, but there's, you know, it just sounds like, you know, from his experience, there's just a lot of bad driving behavior. Because he told that story about how there was a driver that chased some kids into the parking lot here. And what happened was he didn't know what happened for the driver who did that. Because I watched his testimony and I wanted to talk to him to understand, well, what did the kids do wrong? What did that person think the kids do wrong? That he like chased them down. And Jeff he didn't understand that. He just saw a driver, regardless of what kids do, you don't start chasing them in your car, right? So anyway,
Kids.
right. So anyway, he didn't really know, but he did say that he just told me some stories about just a lot of bad driving behavior on Chambers. And so here, I'll stop talking and just take any questions or comments.
With the paving project, real quick, they are doing a few minor changes. So right now, the travel lanes on Chambers are 12-foot lanes, and they are being decreased to 11-foot lanes, and the bike lanes are being increased to 6 to 7-foot lanes, depending on the area. So that slight narrowing of the road with the striping is one thing that's changing, at least with the paving project. And then one of Jeff's primary concerns from the testimony that he gave us was that the Chambers would get paved and then we just forget about Chambers and move on. And I just want to be really clear with you all and with Jeff that like, that's not the case. And that this area in particular with 22nd is still like very much on the city's radar. And it might take another year or two, but it's not going to be one of those projects that just gets checkboxed and that we move on from it. So.
Yes. What about other traffic coming, I mean, going forward on Chambers? That's the question I have, because I feel like the bad behavior is certainly there. Part of it is also gravity coming, you know, going northbound. If people are going down a hill, they're accelerating, and then they don't slow down again. And I think the speed limit there is like 35. So that always encourages people to go even faster. And also I was thinking about the southbound issue because those lanes merge like shortly before that, you know, after the 18 signal. So I see some competition oftentimes with drivers, you know, when they're going southbound because they merge and they become a little competitive and sometimes, you know, try to edge each other out and start going too quickly. So anyway, just traffic calming in general would be great.
And Andrew, is that comment for like more than just this stretch, but kind of the Chambers section?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of get people in general to behave better, because I feel like that it does become a little bit of a speedway, I would say.
We've talked about trying to build a roundabout at 18 Chambers, which obviously is a lot of money, but I think we've even talked about trying to apply for a grant, like a state safety grant for that. So it's an idea that's out there.
I just was gonna mention traffic calming too. I'm wondering south of 18th, what the functional classification of the roadway is. Because north of 18th, right, I'm assuming that's a major arterial. And it looks like, you know, it's some kind of arterial, it looks like one, it feels like one. But south of that, right, it's like pretty residential. And gravity's the major issue, but I'm just wondering if it's a lower function, if more aggressive traffic calming can be applied, right? Because it's probably like a neighborhood collector or something, my guess.
Which you mean it would be, you could make it down to 25 then, right?
Is it an arterial?
All right, so a couple things, if I can share a couple things. It's a minor arterial from like Lorraine Highway to 7th, and then it becomes a major arterial, and then River Road's major arterial. Probably because it gets wider, it's more lanes each way, be my guess. So that's one thing, and not to say that things can change. And then the other question was about the speed limit, and it's 35, around halfway between 24th and 28th. it shifts from, so further south is 35 and then north of around 27th or so to the, or 26 to the north is 30. So
I guess my feedback then is, next time you do a TSP update, right, like, we look at all those functional classifications, like, does that really need to be an arterial? Like, is there actually demand for things south of 18th that would warrant an arterial in the same way that 18th to 7th is, right, it's a different environment, different land use, different types of traffic. And I guess I'm just saying, we should take that into consideration, because that feels more like a neighborhood to me. It looks more like a neighborhood.
right, well, and one thing to support what you're saying is that 28th Avenue is a major collector, and so like you could say that, oh wait, hang on, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong map. Wait, that was the speed, that might be wrong what I just told you. My reading glasses on. I think 28th is a minor arterial too, so it's kind of like you connect them arterial, just like Agate and 24th are both minor arterials. Chambers and 28th are both minor arterials, but we can still do, but that doesn't mean we can't do traffic calming on them too. I mean, yes, you're right. Do they always have to be? I don't know, but I think there's been some support in the city for doing more aggressive traffic calming on arterial streets. And
Like,
so it's
I
not to say we
support
couldn't
that.
look at
I've
that.
just also heard, we can't calm arterials too much because they're arterials, so they're meant to carry a certain volume, right? And neighborhood streets are not meant to carry this volume, so it's okay to do. And I'm not saying like from you, right? Just in general, I think that's how a lot of people view the streets.
Part of it too is like, we don't want to lead to neighborhood cut through. So that's like another balancing thing.
Well,
So
we can do more traffic calming to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, but there is like a rehab facility and there's a bunch of other things like on that street that are just definitely not like, it's not like
Some of
a
those
thoroughfare.
walkers out there walking along the street. That'll calm.
I think also too, like a school, if we apply for a safer to school
Yeah.
grant, we could do like some radar speed feedback signs, I mean, maybe we could do some bump outs, there's probably some other things we could do that would help. with-
Photo enforcement.
I
just
like
putting that out there.
photo enforcement,
Yeah.
great,
So, sorry, we're going a little off topic here. There was a state law that passed
yes.
that the government affairs director of League of Oregon Cities thinks will allow us to do photo speed enforcement. I don't agree with him. Hopefully I'm wrong, but that's not my interpretation of the bill that passed. My interpretation is it allows all cities to have speed enforcement by police officers that were operating in vans. But hopefully I'm wrong about that. So,
Oh,
now
I thought it was signs.
but we're focusing for now in Eugene, we're focusing on red light cameras. And so we're just trying to get that going, which is a big lift. And then that it would be great to be able to do the speed at some point too.
We're over time, but.
I just want to say thank you for contacting Jeff, and I hope that's
Yeah,
going well, that communication with him, and that he's, feeling good about it, and I hope he'll come back if he has more. to
I
say.
will mention that he has been here
I
tonight.
heard, I know he's here, so Jeff, come back if you want
We
to.
also came to our Move Huge open house at Willamette High School and talked to staff quite a bit, so.
Thank you, Jeff, for putting attention on this too.
Yeah, and thank you guys for, it's good to hear that at least it's not just being brought.
Right.
There's
Mhm.
hope for it. So thank you very much.
Sure.
That takes us to what? Neighborhood survey responses.
Confusing.
Yeah. Jerry brought this to our attention, the survey that the city did of neighborhoods and neighborhood groups, and I don't know if you got a chance to read just the summary of it. It was really kind of interesting.
Thank you.
So Jerry, do you have anything to?
Yeah, so neighborhood associations were informed about the survey, and it wasn't just, it was neighborhood association board members as well as a group, a kind of broader group, of community members, how did they word it? That were underrepresented in neighborhood associations. And it was the survey was primarily on kind of neighborhood association activity, but there were 3 questions that I thought were particularly interesting and really reinforced a lot of the work that we are doing and have our eyes on here. So the 3 questions I thought were really interesting were the top 3 things you like, value, or appreciate about your neighborhood, what top 3 things you think need to change or improve, and which issues and needs do you believe matter most in your neighborhood right now. And the responses to those 3 were highly involved walkability, sidewalks, bike and active transportation infrastructure. So I thought that was really noteworthy, specifically for the first question on what you appreciate. Let me see if I can get the. Yeah, so walkability was the #1 cited thing. There was about 1,200 respondents, and if you're looking at a city of 100 and whatever we are, 6,000, I know it's a sample size, maybe statistically valid, but 1,200 is pretty decent. 371 selected walkability as the characteristic they liked most. So I think that reinforces, if we've got citizens saying this is what we like most about our neighborhoods, that what we're doing is reinforcing or supporting that. As far as the second question, and again, that was top 3 things you think you need to change or improve in your neighborhood. #1 was traffic, so just got done talking about that. Sidewalks and paths were #2. Yeah, just got done talking about that. Enforcement, law enforcement, some issues around that. So specifically on sidewalks and paths, 101 respondents mentioned a need for better sidewalks and paths, a need for more sidewalks or sidewalk repairs were indicated by another 55, and construction or maintenance of paths by 46 respondents. And then finally, for the fourth question, this is what issues and needs do you believe matter most in your neighborhood right now? So, off the top of our heads, we live in Eugene, understand homelessness is and the crisis of the in-house is a serious issue. 53% of respondents said that was their top. Public safety and crime, but then 30% of respondents said routes for biking and walking. So, there's a lot of things on here. There's disaster preparedness and need for more housing. Routes for biking and walking, at least among this group, and granted, it absolutely skewed more homeowners, so not necessarily a representative population, but routes for walking and biking was #4, and need for more housing was #8. So it's clearly a big issue and something that's on the citizens' mind. And I think really, again, it's not just us, I guess is kind of the takeaway, right? The big takeaway that this is something important to a lot of community members.
That was interesting to me compared to what I would have expected, that geographically, it wasn't just, the people who in South Eugene who are used to walking about stuff and the stuff. The geographic distribution of the responses was surprisingly wide. So it's there's a lot of support out there for the kinds of things we care about and are working on. So we don't really have any action for us to take, but I just thought it's a interesting point that we're not just talking to ourselves. It's more speaking to a lot of people. Any more discussion on this? Okay, thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it.
Can I just say one thing? I don't mean this to be pejorative, but 85% of respondents were homeowners. So, just like, there's obviously some issues with like who's involved in neighborhood associations.
Sure.
That's not to say they don't do good things. but
100%,
yeah.
100%.
They acknowledge that. in the-
Right, right, yeah.
This is not representative. So that's listening to Brad speak. Yeah, and they tend to be retired and old and everyone's kind of, but. Okay, well, thank you. That takes us to, the working groups. And where
Do
we
we do
stand
a
with
time
that.
check? Because we're not gonna put everything in. What do you think should we look at priorities here? Or,
Yeah, I would be inclined to cut some of the project updates stuff. At the end, we have 10 minutes for that, and I think we could probably get away with maybe a brief BPAC share out and call it good there.
yeah,
Yeah. So that would give us an extra five-ish minutes.
okay. Right, do you want to just go ahead with this one then, Sue?
Unless you wanted to do the
Maybe we do
summer
summer
plans,
first,
just
because it's
because
a
we
little
kind of
bit
need
more.
to know.
Okay.
We're gonna have meetings.
Yeah. I guess I have ATC chairs as leading this, but I'll give some background real quick. Last year, the ATC canceled their July meeting, just because it's summertime and lots of people are out of town and it's kind of
And
just.
the track meet too.
And there was a track meet. I talked to Shane, who has been involved in the ATC for a really long time, and he said canceling the July meeting is pretty standard. That the ATC has been doing that for many years. So I was talking with Sue and Mary about it, and we thought canceling one of the summer meetings, whether it's the July meeting or the August meeting, might be useful. So we wanted to just check in with folks about what your summer plans look like and what would be convenient for you all.
If everybody's gonna be around, we can go ahead and meet, but if there's one that's skimpy, we can look at.
Probably will be not here in August.
You're not gonna be here,
Maybe, yeah.
maybe, should we do
I will be here
in August? Anybody else not? Anybody else not here? in
Daniel
August?
says he can't do August.
Yeah,
In
I'm gonna
August.
be out of town both July and August meeting time.
August would be the 10th, is that right?
Is that the second Thursday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will also not be here in August.
Is there anybody who's not gonna be here in July that you know of?
I'm not gonna be here in July,
Okay,
but I have a whole team of people who could staff the July meeting if we need to.
I won't be in July.
yeah, so it sounds like August is the one to cancel. They're going to, should we do that? It sounds, I think we heard from 4 or 5 people
Yeah,
who aren't gonna be here, so.
that seems.
Yeah, I think in general, August is, other committees I've been on, that's the one that.
Yeah, August is usually the one that gets canceled.
Actually.
Okay,
That's right.
well, maybe I'll take that day off. Okay, cancel July, or
Charlotte has-
cancel August meeting.
Charlotte had something to say. I don't know if we need to vote on that or anything.
Oh, Lucy says she won't be here in July.
Okay.
Well, this is sort of a bridge between items 11 and 12, which is I would suggest to Sue that we might be nice to do a social. So maybe the next subcommittee meeting, we could meet, anyway, I'll offer that we could meet in my backyard.
Oh, nice.
Which might be fun.
And I'm pretty central, I'm a 10th of November,
No, great.
but you have to bring your own chair.
On a bike.
Yes, or one.
Okay, well, do we want to kind of, with that sort of starter loop back to the working group conversation?
Yeah. So I'll start that. We said at our retreat in February that we were going to give our subcommittee plan 3-month trial. So in March, April, and May, we did the whole group subcommittee on the Thursday that's 2 weeks after this. So we wanted to just check in with people and see if you think that's successful, if you think we need to relook at that, or and also if you have ideas, if we do want to change it, what your ideas for that might be. So we want to give you a couple minutes just to check in with people around you and say, how do you think it's going? The subcommittee plan right now, which we're calling a work group this year. So this is our 3-month check-in about that. So could you turn to some people, 2 or 3 people, maybe have a conversation about how you think it's going? And I don't know, can you do people online?
Folks online, maybe if you want to just use the chat feature to chat about.
So just
How
take
you
a
feel
few
like
minutes and
yourself
just do a check-in and say, what do you think of that plan, or what do
What did I think? The one I
Well,
went.
Have you- I've made 2 of them.
Thought it was pretty effective.
Not one.
But yeah. I think we're all-
Not very many.
I mean, it's the same problem I always have with
Yeah.
ATCs. It's very difficult to feel
Yeah.
that.
I like the idea of doing, I actually had to take.
I mean, this is so informational and you have to be so laser focused to get something.
This hasn't gotten a lot of.
So I find all the stuff, I mean, anyway, we've done it. I have. And so it's nice to meet with people, it's nice to, I've enjoyed meeting them. Kind of just chit chat talk.
Some Thursdays I'm free.
Don't have
Just
any-
hasn't worked out, and before it was like, oh, I think
There's a lot of those things out there.
Fine.
I feel I'm much more like.
Yeah.
You finish up your last thought,
Yes,
please.
true, that's true.
Mailbox.
If there was consistent Zoom access to, I don't think I could. Carry out.
Okay, here we go. Do we have time to share out what people said, heard and said? Who's got a comment about how it's going or ideas for, the future, if you have any?
Michelle, you want to report on our?
Oh, sure, maybe. I don't know, I think we thought. I don't know, totally, we just kind of shared what we were feeling. That, I mean, I think maybe sometimes people might think because it's a whole group thing, that they don't need to come. Because there's gonna be a lot of other people there, because last time when we did the small groups, I felt like we were always there. And we had good attendance on that, so I don't know.
Well, and the flip side was, small but mighty group, we actually made some good recommendations
Yeah.
that they
Yeah,
moved to. Mostly we were remembering move huge, but there were a couple of things we did that first meeting as well. But
Right, so they've been effective, they just haven't had tons of participation, like wide participation, yeah.
Yeah, and
Did
we
you
also
agree?
talked about the idea, would there be more participation if there was a Zoom option?
Yeah.
Would that make it more accessible?
Did you agree?
kind of what we talked about, because only one of our group out of 3 has been to any of them at all, just
Yeah.
because of timing and conflicts.
Yeah.
And so Zoom might help a little bit, but also like the positive of having smaller groups was that, if you have like 5 people, we don't just have to like pick a date and then hope whoever can make it.
Yeah.
You can be like, oh, there are 5 of us, like, let's do a little Google poll, figure out what works best for the group. It's a little more flexible, but that also has a lot of other drawbacks, but.
Yeah, so I mean, I was just saying that I went to one of the meetings and it was great because I felt like there was a lot of energy and it was nice meeting in person. But yeah, the Zoom option is definitely something that we're all trained now to like expect, right? And Mary was mentioning about ad hoc committees instead, which I kind of think, yeah, that might be a really good option, because I think that there have been a couple projects where we've sort of jumped into one specific thing and had a lot of energy around it and felt like we accomplished something. Or at least move the ball forward a little
I
bit.
wonder what it would be like to have ad hoc, like sidewalks, where we just had a recommendation. And Rob expressed interest in having some back and forth, so maybe we would have an ad hoc committee who met about sidewalks and came up with, what they think are recommendations. And then, but we could also have like a discussion group, I think would be kind of nice, like these are the things that are, so people can bring ideas to the group, and we have, sometimes our meetings have been more kind of discussion, and that's been really good too. So those are 2 things I see are kind of discussion groups or an ad hoc, if we want to change it up.
and I just throw the question out, how important is it to link to our thinking in February?
Yeah.
Or do we want to just throw that up in the?
One response is that the discussion group could be focused on, part of the discussion.
Yeah.
Could be like, hey, we've got this thing coming up, let's, and you could still bring things to the group. So those are some ideas I have.
Well, and I think as we go through those projects that we came up, from we've already kind of hit the ones that were highest priority to people, so I think we might get into diminishing interest as we go down the list of the ones that got fewer people saying, yeah, that's top priority for me, so.
We've got do we have anything in the chat? Would rather have been. Thanks, Daniel. Okay.
Can you read that for us, Mary?
Yeah, Lucy says, I think it's going well, other than the low attendance from members. I'd like to see the committee working towards one goal or project that is also helpful for the planning staff. By planning staff, you mean city staff?
yeah.
Lucy, yeah, okay. All right, so maybe, I don't know if you're open for having a gathering in June, but maybe we could say, well, let's do a social at Charlotte's house for those who can make it in 2 weeks, just keep our same date, and then maybe from there we can even talk. That could be something we do, is talk about what we want to do with going forward with subcommittees. Possibly, unless somebody has another idea.
Well, my instinct is to cancel the subcommittee meetings in August and July,
Really?
because it's too, yeah, that's my instinct.
Yeah. I think the August one for sure, July. What about the idea of meeting at your house though, in
That's
2
fine,
weeks?
and we can either do June or July. I'm thinking potluck and bring your own chair. I do have tables.
Would people be interested in that?
Be out of town in June.
You out of town in June? Out of town in June?
I might be out of town.
Out of town in June? Is July better?
I don't know.
Not for you. Yeah, no commitments. I know it
It's
has to
hard.
be
Yeah.
probably better for you. Maybe we could send out a little poll
be
to
worse.
members.
The other alternative was, we had that leadership committee that came up with this, this great idea that we're, we could try to convene that group again to talk about it, and then just be spotlight, just to have fun.
Okay, so Sue and I will talk and get back to you about that.
Yeah.
And Charlotte, you can, hopefully.
It might be helpful to just revisit this conversation at the next meeting.
Okay.
So do we do a save the date for social or?
I didn't know if we should poll between June and July,
Yeah.
maybe first.
I think that would be good.
Yeah,
Okay, well, I think that brings us
Well,
to,
you want to, maybe kind of do a doodle poll, set a doodle poll for dates. for-
yeah, it wouldn't have to be even a Thursday. We could check with you.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you.
okay. That brings us to our info share. Keith, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just had just a quick thing you guys might be interested in. Willamette Lane, who is kind of effectively Springfield's Park and Rec District, has been working on a comprehensive plan update. And they did actually a lot of outreach in the last year, surveys and, being at events, talking to folks, figuring out kind of, what is important to the community. And so that information is actually now available. There's a report of that. If you're interested in it, you can find it at the Willamette site, but it's pretty robust. And it wasn't a huge number of people. It was like 1,500 to 2,000 people. But the interesting thing about it, in talking with the survey that you did, and one of the things that came up, like highly rated for what people want more of, are like hiking paths and bike paths. So it's a community-wide, it's not just, everybody's looking for those things. So I think that's interesting that we're finding the same thing across the board. The other thing that I think was sort of interesting too, was, and if you're the data nerd, if you look at this thing, you can really drill down on it. It's got tons of, it's a really, really interesting report. But the other thing that came up that I thought was interesting, that was kind of, that I think you folks would appreciate it, was that there's a need for more bilingual information. Not only not only on the websites, but the signage.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that, because I think we kind of forget about that. So even things like, I was thinking like when you the gal that was doing the presentation, even the signage for etiquette on the bike paths. We kind of forget about some of those things, but that would be good to be thinking about when you're doing that kind of work. So
Can you share that with me?
I can,
Yeah,
yeah, I'll go put it up on that.
anyway, if
section.
you're interested in that report, I could send a link to Willow. She could.
Yeah, that'd be great. Great.
But it's, I think the more, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with Movie Gene, that data when it comes available. So I think, we can all learn from each other on this stuff. So, yeah. Anyway.
Great, thank you. Any questions at all? Okay, well, you can pick and choose of what kind of project updates we have time for.
I think that there's not a ton for me to update you on other than the e-bike expo, which is this Saturday, June 10th. If anybody here is an e-bike owner and feels like they want to go and kind of be an ambassador for what it's like to own an e-bike and ride an e-bike, I know that Jeanette and Cass, the two folks on our team who are putting together the e-bike expo, would really appreciate that support. If you aren't an e-bike owner and it's something you're curious about, you could go and ride some e-bikes, which is cool. But that's kind of the only update I have.
So I don't know if you've told folks this, but just one other thing is, we have been planning to repave Oak and Pearl
Oh,
this
yeah.
year, which actually would there be a lot of curb extensions that would make pedestrian crossings shorter and calm traffic. We were also gonna move the bike lane from the left side to the right side of Pearl. That's all been postponed to next year.
Oh,
Because we just felt like there was too much going on with Eighth and High in terms of the impact to the downtown businesses, et cetera.
I
So.
know we're really optimistic, like, we're gonna do
Right,
four.
so we just want to make sure you folks, we're still planning to make that shift, but it won't happen until next
Yeah,
year.
thanks for bringing that
So
up.
stay on the left side for this year and then, so it's still gonna be there. It's still
Yeah,
gonna
it's still gonna be there. eWeb did go out there and prep for the project and do some like
Yeah, I saw.
plumbing-ish stuff, so now the Pearl bike lane is a little bumpy. It's unfortunately gonna be bumpy for a year until we repave it, but High Street should be open by the end of the summer, in which case you could go south on High Street.
Also, too, like, we had done it this year, it probably would have been like the fall.
Mhm.
We're gonna try to bid it out real early and you get some work, like the concrete work done starting in the winter, so hopefully it won't be like a full year that till when it's done.
Right, that's a good point.
Yeah, the detour that they have in place on High Street now for around the
Yeah.
pipe work that they're doing now is a little sketchy. I mean, it's marked as a detour, but it's not clear how the bikes and cars are supposed to interact.
On high.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, there's a detour mark, but it's just sort of everybody's supposed to come together, you know?
Well, if you want to mention that to Brian, I mean, I don't know what, I mean, the challenge is like, yeah, I don't know, we can talk more about that at work. If you could just like
Yeah,
that,
okay.
but, yeah.
That's how the Eighth Avenue bike detour is right now too. It's like the bike lane disappears, one of the driving lanes disappear, and there's just one lane and the bikes and the drivers are supposed to get into the
Well, it's
same
like,
lane.
yeah, the cars get backed up for a number of blocks and, okay, am I really supposed to get in line way back here? I could easily ride my bike up past a lot of those, but then I gotta merge in at some point and usually
Well,
people are friendly.
Yeah, you're merging in at 2 miles an hour, right? That's pretty safe merge. Right?
Yeah, but
it's
you're
not like-
kind of, you don't know, I'd feel less like I was ticking people off if there was some indication this is what I'm supposed to do.
And I'm sorry, are you talking about high? Okay,
It-
so,
You know, because they've had it kind
Got
of,
it.
by the shed, there's been
Yeah.
pipe work going on.
right, okay. So it's interesting that, and is High Street down to just one lane by the shed?
Yeah.
Yeah. for
Okay, I
about-
mean, I think hopefully that'll be wrapped up in the next couple of weeks, just for what it's worth.
Anyway. Free bikes for kids is this Saturday also, which should be fun. I think they must have all the volunteers I need, but it's a cool event. Anything else?
Everybody saw Jeanette's request for the e-bike being a riding buddy, is that what it was?
That's
Jeanette.
Well, that's the thing I already mentioned about being the e-bike ambassador.
You said that? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
She too used to be a teacher. It's like, okay, she's on summer vacation.
That's not yet.
Okay, well then we can actually adjourn 2 minutes early. I'll have you. So if you want to save these.
I'm saving mine. Can we-
They come in, we can use them.
Yes.
Yeah, leave them with me and I'll put them for snacks.
I don't have to remember.
I can live.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think this was really helpful, actually.
Yeah.
Yes, it is nice to have. names.
Yeah, like
Those
Annie
just
was.
Don't remember
Annie was like-
anything anymore.
I think that's.
No, I was for a couple of years.
He's biking down parallel.
I turned them around.
Oh.
Oh,
Are you gonna go to the back?
Yeah. Yeah, well, tonight, we're thinking a nice bottle of wine open. Celebrate Indictment Day. What do you, what is that? Indictment Day. Oh.
Yeah.